They came at night, under a black sky and the hush of oars, not to conquer a kingdom, but to steal maps, burn a storehouse, or vanish before dawn. This is the hidden war at sea, quiet, surgical raids that reshaped nations. Today we'll travel from the age of privateers to rum-runners and submarine prowlers, three eras when tiny boats and secret orders tipped the balance of power. You'll hear the stories that school books skip, and the tactics that turned local skirmishes into national crises. Oceans are hiding places. A shoreline offers both shelter and surprise. Fog, coves, long dark nights. For centuries, states and shadowy crews exploited that ambiguity. On land, armies parade and declare. At sea, a single skiff can slip between patrols, land 5 men with a keg of powder, and be gone before the sentry's alarm has finished ringing. That combination of speed, low signature, and deniability made maritime raids uniquely disruptive, especially for young nations whose coastlines were thinly defended. In the age of sail, governments issued letters of marque, legal papers that turned a merchant captain into a wartime privateer. Privateers were not mere sea thieves. They were an extension of national policy. A coastal government without a navy could outsource violence, hire privateers, disrupt enemy trade, and profit while the state conserved its limited treasure. Example, privateers like John Paul Jones and dozens of smaller captains preyed on British convoys. Prizes that mattered as much as any battlefield victory. Picture the Revolutionary era. Small American ports, urgent need for ships, and privateers who preyed on British supply lines. They did not conquer cities. They starved convoys, seized cargo, and forced political attention back to the colonies. Each captured ship was both economic pressure and propaganda, a vivid sign that commerce, the lifeblood of the enemy, was vulnerable. Tactical raids on supply ships often did more immediate damage than pitched fleet battles. A successful raid needs 3 things: intelligence, timing, and an exit. Intelligence could be a sympathetic fisherman whispering a tidal schedule, or a trader's loose tongue about a moonlit convoy. Timing was everything. A raid during the change of the watch or when fog hugged the water multiplied surprise. And the exit, a shallow draft launch that could slip into reeds or a back channel, defined survival. Imagine a cutter gliding toward a wooden wharf. 5 men leap ashore, quickly sever the anchoring rope of a supply lugger, and strike the guardhouse with decisive violence. They work with a practiced choreography, fast hands, silent knives, and pre-arranged light signals for the boat to back out. The whole operation can be over in minutes, but its political ripple can be felt for months. Privateering was not an abstraction. It was tactical and it was brutal. A single captured convoy meant fewer soldiers, delayed reinforcements, and panic among merchants. Privateer crews were often former sailors, intimate with local shoals and currents. They knew exactly where a convoy would slow to pass a headland or cross a bar. In some campaigns, privateers were the difference between starvation and survival for ports that depended on maritime trade. But privateering had a moral ambiguity. Men who had once been privateers sometimes slipped into outright piracy when peace returned, or when letters of marque expired. That blurred line between state-sanctioned violence and lawless profit shaped early national policy, forcing governments to decide whether to reward or punish men who had once served them. America's earliest seafaring headaches weren't always European. Off the North African coast, the Barbary corsairs seized merchant ships and demanded tribute. For a young United States without a large navy, these corsairs were an existential threat. Commerce was a lifeline. The US response shifted from paying tributes to building a navy capable of targeted raids and shows of force. Small squadrons and daring coastal operations, precise, political, and meant to demonstrate reach, became the tool of choice. Those early operations taught the Republic a lesson. Maritime security required both ships and surgical action. Fast forward, the Civil War introduced a modern variant: commerce raiders that struck from distant harbors. Designed for speed and secrecy, Confederate raiders targeted Union merchant shipping worldwide, forcing the Union to tie up resources protecting trade routes. A single raider could vanish into the Atlantic, reappear in the Indian Ocean months later, and deliver a strike that cost thousands in lost cargo and insurance. These were not fleet actions, but economic warfare via the sea, proving time and again that you don't need to own the oceans to change them. A well-executed raid drained enemy resources, stoked fear in merchant circles, and forced strategic redeployment far from the main combat theaters. The Barbary crises forced the young US to send squadrons in the early 1800s, actions that helped create the US Navy's modern role. In the 20th century, clandestine waters transformed for a new reason: prohibition. The coastline became a highway for smuggled spirits. Pleasure craft and purpose-built rum-runners exploited shallow inlets and night to land thousands of cases of liquor. Their raids were rarely violent. Their theft targeted regulation and created illegal economies that shaped coastal communities for a generation. The same artistry persisted: scouting, timing, and hidden caches. The same lessons learned by 18th century privateers, adapted to new commodities and new laws. Consider the Confederate commerce raiders like the CSS Alabama, a single raider that captured or sunk dozens of merchant ships and spread fear across oceans. The greatest stealth raid of the modern era sometimes came from beneath the waves. In World War II, enemy submarines prowled closer to American shores than most people imagined, sinking merchant ships and instilling the fear that the war had arrived on American beaches. These were not amphibious landings, they were denial operations, keeping convoys under threat, forcing escort resources and demonstrating that the reach of a submarine was a strategic raid writ large. The psychological impact: civilians seeing lights flicker as a ship disappeared at night, was as potent as material loss. In 1942, German U-boats operated close to American shores in so-called Operation Drumbeat, sinking merchant ships and creating a real home front panic. Across centuries, the common thread is intelligence, the quiet knowledge of currents, the timetables of patrols, and the secrets a coastline keeps. Covert maritime raids succeed because they are deniable and proportionate. A nation can point to a convoy lost and shrug, or it can expose a raider and escalate. That ambiguity turned the sea into a political chessboard where small moves forced disproportionate responses. But this is not just strategy. It's human. Imagine the slave yard owner on a colonial quay counting empty crates, or a harbor master waking to find his ledger and maps gone. Picture a rum-runner's son, watching lights wink off as the boat pulls away, his father returning with pockets heavy and eyes weary. The people who lived these raids felt fear, thrill, loss, and sometimes profit. Those emotions are what made raids repeatable, because in the margins of law and war, opportunity and desperation overlap. These small, sharp sea wars altered economies, sparked policy, and created legends. They forced navies to modernize, nations to build intelligence services, and coastal towns to fortify in new ways. And they left us with stories that cut across time. The same sleight of hand that took a supply ship in 1780 could sink a merchant in 1942. So when you think of the history of a nation, remember that not all wars were fought on open fields or in capital sieges. Some were whispers on the water, quick, precise acts that rearranged fate. If a single night raid could reroute supplies or change public opinion, imagine what a series of them could do. Save this video if you want more hidden histories like this one, and subscribe for another untold chapter next week.